Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. I had to recut the video that I'm doing today just because there was too much to talk about. So today we're going to be focusing on the aviation topic and some other themes, and I'm going to do the proper map update later this week. So one of the biggest news at the end of the last week that came in with the celebration of 80 years celebration of the D-Day in Normandy in France was Emmanuel Macron coming up and stating that France will supply Ukraine with Mirage 2000-5 planes. Mirage 2000-5 planes are relatively old planes. They're about the same generation as F-16's planes, and they have been generally planned to be replaced by the Rafale jets in France by 2030. France has around 26 of these jets, but they've been also used by some other countries in the world, including Taiwan, which is also a friend of Ukraine. And Taiwan was also potentially looking to replace some of their jets as well. Importantly, more modern versions of F-16s are considered to be better than these jets. What I want us to put the baseline in is that whatever planes that Ukraine is flying right now, firstly, they're very low in numbers, and secondly, they're pretty bad. And we're going to touch upon it in details a bit later. But the point is, if Ukraine just gets more planes and they will be able to fly more planes, in addition, even if they're not as good as F-16s or even something better, it is still a benefit for Ukraine. More importantly, it is still a NATO plane, so it is compatible with a lot of the NATO munitions. Granted, not everything, but we're going to again touch about this later. And following with the aviation topic, I think also probably the second biggest news was that Ukraine has launched drones and struck an airfield deep in Russia, and they struck an airfield that was having the Russian Su-57 aircraft. Now, Russian wants to call it the fifth generation plane. In reality, when people are actually discussing it in details, it's considered like generation 4 plus something. It's not actually a fifth generation fighter plane. However, Russians really want to claim that it is. And in general, Russia had about 6 of them that are operational right now. So with Ukrainians striking the airfield that was having this plane, it is now 5. Now, Russians are obviously trying to claim that it was not that it's been just damaged, but judging by the satellite images, there was multiple explosions near the plane, and most likely there's like a little bit of a drone net that is located over this plane, but it didn't help. And most likely whatever that plane had, like planes are not armored vehicles, they don't really have anything to protect them from shrapnel. So most likely this plane is out of commission, and is going to be a question if it's going to be even cheaper maybe to make a whole new one. Additionally, there are reports that supposedly not only the plane was struck, but also that there was an air defense system with Panzer that was struck and an S-300 air defense system that was also destroyed. Now, I do feel that this news is a little bit less likely, mostly because as we see, the craters from the explosions are relatively small. So these were not like major missiles or anything. It seems that these were drones, long-range drones, but the amount of explosives that they carried was relatively small, enough to damage something sensitive as a plane and maybe damage some of the anti-air systems, but definitely I would be careful with using the word destroy for other systems, especially because we're not having images for this, not unlike where we're seeing the plane and explosion craters right next to it. And Ukrainians are stating that everyone is very, 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 very mad about it. Russians are big mad about Ukrainians striking these planes. They were really trying to preserve these planes. Each one of them nominally costs, and the costs vary. Like someone says that it can nominally cost 30 million euros plus. The others say that it can go over 100 million, depending on different resources and how it's built and the availability of reserve parts. So evaluation is wild, But in general, it's many tens of millions of dollars that Ukraine just damaged Russia in, which is a great achievement, especially because Russians wanted to preserve this plane. They were flying this plane very far away from the Ukrainian front lines, and they were basically just launching long-range missiles. So good, really good news. This is a first, and this is definitely painful, and it's a huge propaganda hit. I can also tell you that if we would have some kind of thermometer for what's the temperature with regards to the Russian propagandists yelling and being big mad about what Ukraine does, this would be probably the new record high, because Russian Telegram channels and the propaganda media, they were really on the next level. It was such a painful hit for them, and I don't want to underestimate just how painful it is. It's best been summarized that for the most part, the Russians has this cycle where they goes like, ha ha ha, Ukrainians don't have anything. Whatever the weapons the allies are supplying to Ukraine is not gonna work. Wah ha ha ha. And then the second stage is like, oh my God, they're destroying again our new stuff. Why are we not protecting our expensive stuff? How did this happen? How did the country that doesn't have anything is striking our things? Then again to transition to again Ukraine doesn't have anything, and rinse and repeat. There is also additional news with regards to the F-16s, which is that Ukraine is frustrated with the F-16 training programs. So there are two big issues with the training. One is that in US, they have only limited numbers of pilots that they can train. Supposedly, it's 12 pilots that they can train, which is not a lot, given that each of the F-16 planes requires 2 people to fly it. And if we say that it's 12 pilots trained, that means it's only 6 planes that can be operational. Beyond that, in Denmark, there was a F-16 program for additional 8 pilots for the F-16s, but this program is now running its last year, and it's supposedly going to be closed down. At least this is the plan. Right now, there is a little bit of a scramble on how to approach this question, so I'm not putting like a complete big mad from my side on this. So I think that there's going to be a little bit of a maneuverability and adjustment of resources and priority on the Allies side, but I do believe that more capacity for training of pilots is needed, and the talks are on the way from what I'm hearing. But it's definitely still frustrating to know that Ukrainians are not being trained fast enough. And then we get to the actual big news. So one of the big things that I do is I watch the experts and people that actually know what they're talking about. And majority of the time, they are either Russian speakers or Ukrainian speakers. And that's why I can argue with a lot of Western media with regards to what is happening on the war and so on. And I think with this one over here, I watched one of the best, if not the best, interview I've seen through the whole war. It was to the point, it was about 50 minutes long, and it was basically information after information after information after information. It was answering all of the major questions. So while I'm going to post the link, and if you understand Ukrainian, you can listen to the interview that doesn't have the subtitles, but I will tell you the main points from the interview. There's going to be a lot of information, so let's go right away. So right before you is Serhiy Golubtsov. He's a brigadier general of Ukrainian Armed Forces Command. He is talking about different types of equipment that Ukrainians are using, the challenges that they're having, and answering the questions. So the first block is he answering about the JDAM aviation bombs. These are the aviation bombs, the dumb aviation bombs that have been modified to have gliding capabilities. And Ukraine got these bombs before Russia actually created their gliding aviation bomb that are posing one of the biggest threats to Ukrainians on frontline, mostly because Russia is using them at huge capacity and they're using really heavy bombs, whereas the bombs that are being provided by the Western allies are relatively small. There was a lot of slow injection at the start, that initially they got the first test version, and then they had it to take some time to adapt the planes. The Ukrainian planes that they're flying were not adapted to carry these munitions. So they had to essentially create new pathways for electronics, add new capabilities to existing Ukrainian planes. And it's obviously is hard to do when all of your aviation is A, being targeted by Russians, and B, is really needed on the front line like yesterday. Beyond that, Ukraine is claiming that they are now modifying and adapting both the JDAM bombs and are making their own glided bombs that will be able to overcome Russian GPS jamming and therefore will be able to put them to test, well, present first test batches to the front line in the coming few weeks to see how they will react. Next, there was a question with regards to GBU-39 small diameter bombs that appeared recently on the Ukrainian planes. These have shown themselves to be absolutely amazing and very, very highly praised by the Ukrainians. It is turned out that it's very hard for Russians to counter them because their small profile and low weight allows for planes to carry multiple of them, and also it is problematic for the Russian anti-air systems to actually lock onto these targets to destroy them and capture them on their radar images. So it's a very nice thing that was delivered to Ukrainians and have proven themselves very, very capable, because not only they're easy to carry and they're penetrating the Russian radar systems, they're also penetrating Russian information electronic warfare systems because they have integrated targeting guidance. So these GBU-39 small diameter bombs can be pre-programmed for multiple targets from the single launch point. So the plane can come in, launch these bombs, and they will fly and find their own target despite the electronic warfare that Russia tries to set. But they're not dependent on the GPS. And their hitting percentage has been extremely high, near 100%. The deviation from the target is very, very low. The problem is that, again, adjusting the planes for the needs of these bombs takes quite a long time. It's a challenging task, and this is something that the F-16s will hopefully help Ukraine with. Russia overall has still advantage in the air. Ukrainian planes are still underwhelming compared to whatever Russia is flying. And if we're comparing sorties, then Ukraine is flying 10 times less sorties than the Russians. F-16s, the general is saying, will not be a game changer, that it will require a more complex solution where it's not going to be only the planes, the F-16s, but it's also going to be the long-range AWACS, the flying radar system. It's also going to be systems that are working on the ground, including the ground launch capabilities with HIMARS, including the Patriot systems and other anti-air assets. So to start dominating in the air, it will require a more complex solution, and Ukraine does have that plan. The plan consists of 3 stages that Ukraine needs to achieve. Stage number 1, defend. Stage number 2, contest. And stage number 3, dominate. Or if you want a more simple perspective, crawl, walk, run. And with the current assets that Ukraine has right now, their aviation is not even crawling. They are barely moving compared to what they hope to achieve following this plan that was not only accepted by the Ukrainian Air Force, but also agreed with the allies. So all of the supplies and all of the purposes are following this plan. So initial point that Ukraine wants to do is to make sure that the skies of Ukraine are defended. They want to prevent the Russian planes to fly into Ukrainian territory. They want to deny drones and other missiles and other aerial targets to fly freely over the Ukrainian land. Secondly, they want to contest the Russian-controlled territory and when Russians are using their aviation. So right now it's about they wanna go essentially towards the front line and push the Russian planes. The general states about 50 kilometers further from where they're operating right now from the front line. And then the next step is to dominate, to get Russians from the air of Ukraine and from the operational air above the battlefield, and to start essentially influencing the ground operations. So it's a longer plan. It's going to be multi-year. That's why whenever we're talking about when the F-16s are going to come in, he's cautioning you to not expect F-16s to just instantly be game changers. It's going to be a gradual process following a set plan. For this year, it's expected that there is going to come in about 3 to 4 F-16s that's going to be active in Ukraine. But we also need to understand that Ukraine will not only have the F-16s that are active in Ukraine, there's also going to be a certain number of F-16s dedicated for training. It's going to be Ukrainian F-16s, but it's going to be Ukrainian staff that are going to be flying and training in them and getting the pilot hours that they need. Beyond that, certain number of planes need to be sent in reserves beyond the borders of Ukraine. So if a Ukrainian plane gets either damaged or it requires maintenance, then it has a substitute available so the sorties can be continuously carried out. Overall, this year is expected to be relatively slow for the F-16s, and we should not expect it to be a game changer, but it's going to be a first brick in the wall. Then he talks about how the Storm Shadow Scalp missiles showed themselves in the combat. He says that it was a very effective weapon. However, Russia has learned the initial patterns of these weapons and they learned to shut them down. Right now, Ukrainians are still using these to a great effect, but it's not because the weapons itself are useful, it's because Ukraine is also adapting to the Russian countermeasures. Right now, they're not just launching their missiles and expecting them to hit, they are now making complex trajectories to use for their planes to fly in. They're also not using just the missiles themselves, they're also adding additional decoy targets, plus the drones to make sure that the Russian anti-air systems are engaged. They are additionally using the HARM missiles to fire towards the Russian position. A HARM missile is an anti-radiation missile. It's a missile that flies in, it detects that there is some kind of radar turned on, and so this radar is emitting certain waves in certain frequency, and then this HARM missile detects that frequency and then targets where that radar installation is and tries to strike it. So Ukraine is using all of this tandem, this complex, together with drones and the HIMARS and ATACMS launchers together to make this barrage of very multi-layers attacks. And this is helping Ukraine already to dominate and demilitarize Crimea, to say the least. It's having a great effect, but it's again a complex operation. It's not just put some missiles on the plane, just fly in, and there you go. It is a proper difficult warfare. Overall, the activities that needs to be aligned between different units are challenging. They're not difficult, but they require precise timing. So he's emphasizing the use of the coordination between the types of forces that is required to make sure that these strikes are carried out with success. And he has been very glad to say that there has been improvement on that front. The general is very much in favor and is very impressed by the allies and what they are delivering and have been delivering so far. He's very thankful. He's also stating that the help that the allies are delivering to Ukraine is increasing. If before we were talking about dozens of number of equipments that are being units of equipments that are being delivered to Ukraine, now the planning goes in hundreds. And he is very happy that also sophistication of weapons being delivered is increasing. With regards to F-16s, the F-16s that will be delivered to Ukraine are F-16s that are considered to be midlife updated F-16s. And I will leave a link in description because there is a lot of reading here. In short, very simplified way, these F-16s are a lot better to work with NATO high precision weapons. Their targeting systems are excellent, and if Ukrainians are using some precise ammunition, let's say the deviation can be a couple of meters, with the F-16s this can narrow it down to maybe centimeters. So it's a really extensive upgrade of many capabilities of the F-16 older planes, and it's great that Ukraine is going to be getting it. The anti-air missiles that are going to be going with the F-16s are expected to be 180 kilometers plus. Primary targets that Ukraine really wants to get with the anti-air systems on the F-16 planes is the Russian bombers. They really want to get it, and the Russian bombers have been adapting. They, if before they were kind of just flying these munition bombs from close up and just striking them very easily, then Ukraine started deploying their roaming Patriot missile systems, and they were able to shut down a lot of the planes off the air. Since then, Russians have been adapting. They're actively hunting for the Patriot systems. So they have hunter-seeker parties operating alongside the bombers to make sure that the Patriot cannot just fire them down. So majority of the recent planes that Ukraine was shutting down was due to the ambushes that they created with the Manpad system on the ground, which is really cool to know. With regards to question on when the F-16s will be in Ukraine, the general stated that the low training capacity of allies is a challenge, and they need to work on how to increase that capacity, specifically because it takes not only to learn how to fly the F-16, but how to use different types of weapons. And he states that the targeting systems and just computer systems on the F-16s are extremely different from whatever they have on their Soviet counterparts. So it's like learning how to fly anew. There will be some effect this year, obviously, but they also, with their first training groups, they discovered that language is crucial. And they tried training their first groups with the help of the translator, but it just didn't work out. It never provided efficiency, so they had to scrap the approach and start anew. Right now, the modern training is 2.5 to 4 months is intense language training for the pilots, after which they proceed to training on the planes. And this is going to be a big issue because they need to make sure that they can adapt this whole system all across the Ukrainian approaches that they have for these planes, because especially the documentation and maintenance and procedure documentation is again all in English. And at the end, General talked about what other planes they would like to have. This interview, as I understood, was recorded before the Macron announced the Mirage planes, but he was stating that the next plane that Ukrainians would want to get, and this is important, he underscored after F-16s have been set up and delivered and operational, is Gripen planes, because they are well suited to the existing conditions in Ukraine. And with the work done on F-16s, he is expecting that the integration would be a lot easier. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you find it interesting. Again, the second part with a lot of other news is coming very shortly this week. I love you all, guys. Slava Ukraini, and I'll see you next time.